right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome inside the Fan Cave. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Nightly, we're here 7 nights a week. That includes the weekends at 412-575-2600. Bob Pompeani joined tonight by Chris Mueller up at 93.7 The Fan, the PM team. I guess you and Andrew rotate some nights here. Chris, I wasn't aware that the switch had taken place, but glad you're here tonight.
Well, that's kind of on me because I could have texted you or told you at literally any point in the day before 2 minutes ago when I actually did text you this. But he is, of course, in Bradenton with what I like to call the C-suite, enjoying the sun for a few days. You know how that goes, Bob. You've been on some of these little junkets with the real players.
Yeah,
that
the
are
real
out
players.
there, the real movers and shakers.
You don't have to say anything else. I know exactly what you're talking about. So, well, it's good to have you here, and we can get into the Pirates. I want to talk about Skeens only because he, there's a lot of expectation. We saw him pitch the other day, and he has now 5 different pitches, and he's added some things to his repertoire. I was watching Max Fried tonight, and he has 7 pitches that he could call upon. He's a veteran guy they gave a whole bunch of money to. For the Yankees. But Skeens is still the guy that looked at as potentially the best pitcher in the game. He is the leader when it comes to trying to figure out who's going to win the Cy Young Award this year in the National League. Are your expectations as high as everyone's? Or, at some point I would expect maybe a little bit of a dip just because, but he doesn't strike me as the kind of person right now that has a lack of confidence in any way. He seems like he could stare you down and tell you, I'm going to give you this and you're not going to hit it, period.
I think like almost any pitcher in the modern era, and obviously very few, if any, have his skill set, occasionally somebody's going to guess right and square up one of his fastballs every so often, like maybe once every 2 games, and hit it over the fence. But I think he should be the best pitcher in baseball for the next 10 years. He is pretty new to pitching, so there's not a ton of like high-end wear and tear on his arm, Bob. And I'm sure you've occasionally seen, or maybe if you fall down the YouTube rabbit hole when you're just sitting around, like these videos of people telling stories about Greg Maddux setting up hitters and how he was just unbelievably cerebral on the mound and how he attacked in different ways. Skeens is basically that level of intellect, it seems like, and that level of craftsmanship with one of the greatest just pure arms we've ever seen as far as what it's capable of. What was he throwing? Cutters in that first outing of the spring?
Yeah. Just
messing around with a cutter to destroy left-handed bats? Like, you'd think that he did that because lefties hit him better than righties last year. Au contraire, Pomp. They were actually worse in the limited time that they saw him, but he still saw fit to add another weapon to the arsenal. I think this is not an crazy statement. Say the next 10 years he does not suffer an arm injury. He makes basically full season's worth of starts. He just proves to be very durable. Why can't he win 5 Cy Youngs in 10 years? Seriously.
Yeah.
Why not?
I mean, I could have made a case for him last year, if you wanted to.
I would have voted for him last year, but for the record, I don't have a Cy Young vote, and maybe other people are out there listening to me say that I would have voted for him, saying, good thing you don't have a vote. He was the best pitcher in baseball. I only think there's one guy even close, and it's Skubal in Detroit. Yeah,
and Derek Skubal won it in the American League, but he's similar. He's a lefty. This guy can blow you away, and I'm anxious to see. And I think we were talking today with Joe on our program. I'm sure you guys kicked this around. Skeens will likely be the opening day starter in Miami. They have the Yankees as their home series opener, and even though he doesn't, and if he starts the opener in Miami, I don't think he's going to be in a position to start the home opener. But to me, he's got to pitch in that series somehow. I want to see him against the Yankees right off the bat.
I'm more inclined, maybe you're just looking at it differently from more of a marketing, or you just want to see the great matchup, which I understand. If you're the Pirates and you are trying to contend, you got to put him on what amounts to an immediate schedule and try to pitch him every 5th day as often as possible. I would imagine that the restrictor plate is gone now that he's logged the innings that he did last year. If you want to skip one start, I guess, or one turn early to get him set up for the Yankees, that's fine, but my goal, if I were the Pirates, would be make sure every 5th day, as often as possible, Skeens is taking the ball. Also, Bob, I just thought a riveting phone call today from Andrew and Carnegie on the show with Joe. I have a suggestion, though. Donnie and I kicked this around. We think you need to call Joe when he's working a solo show and give him a taste of his own medicine. Some sample names we thought of for you were Milton and Hershey. We also thought of Ben and Franklin Park.
Yeah.
We have some other ones we could workshop, but there's nothing Donnie and I would like to hear more than you giving Joe a taste of his own medicine.
I've thought about that before, but I couldn't come up with a voice that he would not know right off the bat. I'm trying to figure out, and I've been practicing actually, so maybe I'll.
Well, you have such a deep voice, you couldn't do the "Hey, Bob," you know, but you could just come up with your own.
Hey, Joe.
You could come up with.
It doesn't work.
Right, but we think you need to do this. You need to strike back against him one of these times and strike a blow for good.
All right, I'll consider that. In the meantime, we're going to talk some football when we come back as well. It's 412-575-2600. Join Chris and I. All you have to do is call those numbers as we continue live right here. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, 7 nights a week, KDKA Plus, 93.7 The Fan. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is our Xfinity Mobile Tweet of the Night. It comes from RMU Basketball. How about Andy Toole? He is the Coach of the Year. An amazing story out there at Robert Morris as they went from 10 wins and a completely different roster last year to 23 wins, the Horizon League Championship, and now they get to play a home game. They also have the Player of the Year, and that would be Fulgarius, and then Dickerson, who is the Defensive Player of the Year. And Chris, that's a great story because it looked like there was no way they were going to be able to turn that around from last year. And here they are with a team that has really surprised, I think, everyone, not only in that conference, but everyone around here locally. So kudos to them.
Yeah, I think Andy Toole deserves a ton of credit in this era. It's hard to, especially in the mid-majors, to keep a roster together and put a new roster together and get them to play as cohesively as Robert Morris does. I think like a lot of people, started getting more interested in what they were doing later on in the year, and that's when you've seen them playing their best ball. But they've been nothing short of terrific. And I think he was also, Bob, I don't know about you, I had heard rumblings that he definitely had his job in some jeopardy heading into this season. This was like a make or break year for him. Well, he's made it in a big way, and they have as good a chance as anybody to get to the NCAA tournament. And I don't know, they look like the kind of team that if they get there, they'll be a high double-digit seed, but they kind of play a style of basketball that I think could give a better seed, a better team, a higher seed fits in the first round.
I agree with that for sure. And we should just give some credit to Chris King, their athletic director as well. He's done a very nice job and, showed patience and said we're going to figure this out, and they did. So they'll play on Thursday night in their game over on their campus. Meanwhile, we'll talk about, real quick, Jari's back. That's not a surprise necessarily, consider the way Joel Blomqvist has played. But, I wonder what the end game is. Obviously, they'd like to get him right, just because there's so much invested in him, if not for him to continue here, for at least an opportunity maybe to move him to somebody. What do you think they'll do here moving forward with their goalies?
I think this is way more about Blomqvist just being so bad up here and needing to play in the AHL maybe around a different level of talent and just being around guys that are playing maybe a little bit more structured and responsibly than the Penguins do at the NHL level than it is anything about Jari. Like, I just think rightly the Penguins realized that keeping Blomqvist up here any further was going to potentially damage his confidence in the longer term. I mean, they can afford for Jari to be cannon fodder because I think it's pretty obvious they've given up on him. He's gotten, about 8 different chances to prove he's the man. At this point, Jari's just a guy that they're probably going to have to buy out if we're being realistic, and they just want him to absorb shots because Blomqvist is still part of their future, and Jari is very much not.
Got a tweet here from Character Matters, says, please explain franchise tag tonight. It's relevant only because we saw T. Higgins get one, and for those of you who don't know, that is an option that teams have. They can designate someone a franchise player or a transition player, and that means if you're a franchise, you get the average of the top 5 salaries, and it's, I think, 26-point-something million for T. Higgins this year. So that takes him off the market. And I wonder is there someone else on that market? Is it Godwin? Who else is available in the free agent market for when it comes to wide receivers?
I mean, it's not super pretty. I think Keenan Allen's name is still right near the top of that list. Donnie and I were kind of goofing around about this today because it broke, I think, during the show after you guys were off the air that Darius Slay was being cut loose by Philly, and he has obvious ties to Terrell Austin from his time starting his career in Detroit. Slay, like, I don't know, every other player who's ever existed seemingly loves Mike Tomlin. And so there's this idea maybe he and the Steelers would be a fit. And Donnie and I just started ruminating and thinking about how the Steelers have become like the island for wayward toys or misfit toys or guys at the end of the line. And it's like, man, they just, what are we doing here with wide receiver? Are they going to really go looking for Keenan Allen or Robert Woods? Because we kept looking for old receivers who were free agents, and literally the second name that pops up is Robert Woods. Like, are we really going to do that? I mean, when you start looking at that position, what's available and what they need, it seems more and more obvious that even with their defensive line needs, Bob, they're probably going to end up drafting a receiver.
Yeah, and I think in the first round, they have to. I think if they're not going to do anything with Pickens, they need some help for him for sure for this year. Let's get to the phone calls. It's 412-575-2600. Our number one Cochran Go One Better caller of the night is Jim in Leechburg. First up tonight. Hey, Jim.
Hi, Bob and Chris. I was wondering, the Penguins, the trade is coming up, and I was wondering who they would trade, what player they would trade and for what position.
Well, if they could, they would trade probably Carlson and Graves, but that's not possible unless you have people willing to take all of that. Plus, they're not playing very well, and I'll tell you, Carlson, he cost them the game yesterday in the second period. But Rickard Rakell is going to be the big name that everybody talks about, and if the return is right, I could see them making that deal. In fact, I would encourage them to do it if the return is right. And I've seen some there was a tweet about Utah with a first and a second and a player. Something like that would pique my interest.
Yeah, I think if you're trading Rakell, who has 3 years left after this year, at what is already a bargain contract and what will only continue to be more of one when the cap goes up, I think there's two things at play here, maybe more than two things. Because just quickly, I'd say Grzelcyk, Beauvillier, Achari still might be a guy who gets dealt. Like, they've got a couple of names of just guys.
But you're not going to get all that much back for
picks.
those guys.
Well, no, but there's, I forget which player it was, but there's a guy comparable to Beauvillier in terms of pedigree and everything else who I think still managed to get a second-round pick. So you could get more than you expect for one of those guys maybe just because of certain realities of the league. And it's a very favorable seller's market. There's only like 6 true selling teams. Quickly, though, with Rakell, Bob, I'll bounce this one off of you and everybody else. A couple things at play. One, Crosby's points per game streak, being at least a point per game player, I think is at least partially dependent on Rakell still being here. Crosby's at 65 points in 61 games. I know that matters to him to some degree at least, and definitely matters to them. It's probably the one big thing to keep watching for this season. You'd also be saying, like, hey, if we trade Rakell, we're kind of telling you that we don't think this rebuild's going to be done in 2 to 3 years, or we think that it's better to just have him as an asset to trade than as a player for the future. That's another thing. And then this is the other consideration, though. Do you think that this player, who might fetch, like you said, a big return depending on the team, is having a career year and is probably never going to have a value to you that's this high? I think that might be true. He's at 28 goals. He's probably going to get to 35. That would be, I believe, a career high by 1 for him. Right. At 31 years old, you have to kind of think of this in asset management terms, and I think the best way to manage this asset is probably to trade him. I just don't think that'll actually happen.
Yeah, and for that reason, I agree, but I also know what you just said about the 3 years remaining. He will be looked at as a bargain at his salary once the cap goes up, because to replace somebody like that, if you go into free agency, you're going to have to spend probably $6 to $7 million a year based on what the market may demand at that point. So there are two ways to look at that. It just depends on what the offer is, whatever they get. And if it's not him, I'd love for them to somehow figure out a way to move Carlson if he would be agreeable to it. I was surprised to hear an interview yesterday in which he said they haven't even asked him that. I thought by now they would have asked that. Hey, what is your feeling about this no movement clause? Would you be willing? But so far that hasn't happened, I guess.
But Dubas has said he has no intention, at least publicly he said, I don't really want to ask guys that have those clauses to avoid the clause or to waive the clause so that they can be dealt to play ball like that. I think he sees that as something that's a sign of respect, even if it's guys he didn't sign to one. It's, hey, you've earned it in this league, this desire to kind of call your shot. I think Florida trading with Chicago to get Seth Jones down there is a big blow to the Penguins' hopes, because Jones is a right-handed defenseman. He's obviously a big money guy. If there was a team that would have taken on the risk of Erik Karlsson because of what he could do from an upside potential that wants to go for it all again, it would be the defending champs, but now they've got a guy that they feel is a better fit there. So I don't think Karlsson's going anywhere on Friday or by Friday.
I was just looking. Let's go to RJ in Roslyn Farms. Hello, RJ.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, thanks.
Okay, good. Hey, I just got back from vacation this weekend for a couple weeks in Florida.
Nice.
And yeah, it was too bad the first week, Bob, to play golf. It was cold and raining most of the time.
Still play.
But anyway, talking to people waiting in lines to eat down there. Here we found a couple guys that asked where I was from, and they were from Chicago. Several of them. Okay. And this was different days. And so I says, we got one of your guys, Justin Fields. And they just shook their head, and I said, what's the story on him? And every one of the guys, and these are different days, different places, said the same thing. He looks like a great athlete, a great quarterback until he gets there and and plays. And they said he doesn't have a grasp of the game and making changes during the game that easily, and he's not that accurate at throwing the ball.
Well, I think we've seen that, RJ, but I still think there's room for him to grow there. And if they're going to make this decision, Chris, we have about 30 seconds. Turn it to you about this. I got to believe they're going to go in Fields' direction, not Wilson, if it's a choice between the two at this point, for a lot of reasons, age being one of them.
Ian Rappaport, fresh off his dust-up last week, said on NFL Network that he thinks Fields is the inside track, but they're losing time, they're losing ground, burning daylight when it comes to an exclusive negotiating window before legal tampering. I think they might be letting it slip away. Also, that call from RJ made it seem like they had just acquired Fields and we had never seen him play 6 games in a Steeler uniform. What are we doing, RJ? You've got your own body of work to evaluate.
He looked better in those 6 games than he did with Chicago. So, I mean, there's room for improvement. I still think there's room for him to move even higher. We're due for a break. We'll come back with more. It's the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, KDKA Plus and 93.7 The Fan.
The Nightly Sports Call is brought to you in part by Xfinity Mobile. Stream at full length on the go. Xfinity, bring on the good stuff.
Now it's time to bring on Ken Rice to tell us what's coming up tonight at 11 on KDKA. Ken?
Hey, Bob. Tonight, police are searching for a truck driver charged with crashing into and knocking a car off a bridge and into a lake, killing a man. Plus, the fight to keep funding for public universities here in Pittsburgh and some messy, even potentially dangerous weather coming this week, all next at 11.
All right, Ken, thanks very much. Chris, we are flat out of time, so thank you for being here. I assume you're here tomorrow night as well?
No, I don't think I am. I'm going to have to consult with Pony. All he asked about was tonight. So it could be a big
short trip.
Mystery. We got to get Scooby-Doo and the gang on this one, Bob.
All right. Well, I'll see you tomorrow or Wednesday, one of those 2 nights, coming up right here. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. And thank you guys for watching. See you again tomorrow night right here at 10:35. Make it a good one.